Okay, so today we thought we would kind of talk about a few ideas from various thinkers, but especially like Plato and Aristotle that John Vervaeke and Christopher Mastro Pietro in their book Awakening from the Meaning Crisis kind of talk about around page 130, if anyone has a book. So we were thinking we would kind of go through some of these ideas one by one and kind of talk about them as we talk about those ideas and kind of see what happens.
Yeah, just gonna riff on it. It's gonna be
Yeah,
fun.
sounds
Yeah.
good. So I guess the background, this kind of one of the huge ideas that recurs throughout intellectual history in the West started with Plato. He had perhaps the first psychological theory where the psyche is composed of three parts, like a human, a man, a monster, and a lion. So the man is like the intellect and rationality. They can do calculation. They can weigh and measure things and compare things. They can step back from desires and passions to kind of try to figure out their nature. And then there is the monster in human beings, which is driven by appetite. So, sexual or hunger, or all sorts of desires that are innate to humans. And finally, there is the lion, which is kind of basically driven by honor, driven by socially things that are socially not only accepted but vaunted and esteemed. So this is maybe military victory or political power or fame, these kinds of things that can, to put it mildly, get us in big trouble.
Hmm.
But yeah, so those are the three kinds of parts of the souls. And Plato's idea is that you want to balance those three parts of the soul, so that you can not only get in touch with yourself and to know when you're deceiving yourself, but also to get in touch with the greater things within and outside yourself, with what he calls the good and with reality. And if you can kind of balance those parts of yourself, develop your wisdom, then you can develop a fullness of being and, of course, happiness and, whatever prosperity that is your fate in this life is likely to come about.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, you had this is interesting. When you had mentioned it originally, you had drawn sort of a very loose parallel with Freud's id ego and superego. And I found it, I mean, I your description of it today is sort of a different facet that I
Mm,
find really interesting. I'm not saying other, but like, oh, I can see how these relate, and then that makes the whole thing much more interesting, more complicated,
mm,
more detailed. Um, where you have I mean, the id and the monster, pretty clear.
mm.
Um, Not too much question there. But then the ego, is the ego the man or is the ego the lion?
I think the man, because the
Okay.
superego, I think, would be the lion.
That's interesting because the man being very rational and the lion being um
Kind of
both
socially
both socially
oriented.
and but then
Yeah.
also like I very much get like military or political um victories, and oftentimes there's a lot of emotion in that.
Yeah.
Um I'm thinking modern day like sports events,
Mm, yeah.
um which is definitely not super ego territory, but there is something about a lion um that has in the West been kind of regal, royal,
Mm,
uh, and historically speaking, kings were sort of the ordering structure of the society, and so
mm,
the lion
mm,
kind of standing in for the ordering structure of the society makes sense.
mm,
Um, but the superego being emotional doesn't, and so we're like
mm,
this. The fascination for me is we are almost like comparing two different rainbows or totem poles or some sort of
mm,
broken structure that is meant to
mm,
delineate the same thing, and it's a
mm,
label structure,
mm.
but they're not quite one to one,
Yeah.
and yet they're describing the human soul or the human psyche. So we can sort of take that, and anywhere I think that there's a mismatch, it becomes an interesting point of inquiry as far as like, oh well, what is the hierarchy, or how does one blend into the other? What is the relationship?
Mm.
um so I don't know if you have anything to say about that.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't read much Freud. I just have read about him, and I have some idea of those three parts. But yeah, as you were talking, I was thinking how more they seem different. I mean, I know it seems like Plato emphasizes the man part as like in another dialogue, he talks about how you can have like a chariot. He talks about the soul as like a charioteer. And so the charioteer is like that rational part, but then the two horses are like the appetitive and the honor seeking part. And he extends this, I think this is in the Phaedrus, to where, it's a good analogy because it's like you're trying to go in one direction, but if one horse is going in one direction, the other horse is going the other direction, and you're sort of the charioteer is confused as to what to do or where they want to go. That's like a good sort of analogy. But if everybody's going in the same direction, it's this idea that you can kind of progress in life. And he turns it into this whole big myth where you can go into heaven and even beyond heaven into the pure, like, realm of being and intelligence. So like things that are discernible only to the intelligence and beyond the senses. And he said that's where the gods live and everything beyond heaven and stuff. But anyway, yeah. I wonder one thing is I sort of feel like, I don't know, maybe Plato is more optimistic or sort of he seems to emphasize the very the possibility of the soul to really transcend uh I don't know, to transcend itself, let's say that. And I thought Freud was sort of more like balancing things so you can sort of be regularly unhappy like a balanced human being and not like neurotically unhappy and totally dysfunctional or something like that. I feel like Freud doesn't have, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but he doesn't nearly have that sense of, and maybe this is why Jung like broke from him in general. To me it seems like Freud doesn't have, he's at heart like a doctor and just still trying to diagnose the patient and just to like be sort of normal and not sort of neurotic and crazy, but doesn't seem to have the sort of spiritual vitality, this Empyrean kind of hope that Plato has that eventually kind of made its way into Christianity with this hope of this eternal, this union with divine love, with eternal life, and things like that. I just, it almost seems comical to think of Freud somehow being made into some kind of divine figure, or I mean, not him, but his thinking being made into some sort of like really transcendent spirituality.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, man. That was rich. um yeah, I don't know much about Freud. I will say I've read a few of his books back in college. um the therapist I'm working with, who I have a lot of respect for. He has a lot of respect for Freud, although he's a very Jungian kind of guy. So, we don't talk philosophy and theory during my sessions, so I haven't really been able to get very deep with him. But he's had me sort of reassess Freud. Um, and so all of that is a preamble for me to say that, like, I don't know that I understand Freud very well, but what I do, there's a few points about Freud that I do know. Um, One, he was active during Victorian times when there was a lot of neuroticism and suppression and
Mm,
alienation from our more
mm,
animal sides, in a
mm.
positive way, are just we're animals. We're more than animals, but
Yeah.
we aren't
Yeah.
not animals. We're not
Yeah.
robots. We're animals that can think. So that
Yeah.
sort of animal nature was very absent from the society he was working in.
Yeah. That
Um,
makes sense.
he was on a lot of cocaine. If people don't know that, he
Yeah.
there are notes about him. I forget exactly. He's like, oh, I gave a presentation to the Viennese um, psychological society, and I don't think any of them understood me, but that's okay. I am a genius. Did a bunch of coke. I feel great. Like
Oh,
it's something
Jesus.
like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And he was a genius. Like he
Yeah.
invented
Yeah.
psychology. Like there's no argument there, but chemically altered substances, or altering substances, do muddy the waters a bit. And then the other thing I'll say about Freud before I get into what you were saying is something I found out. One of his early papers is called the Etiology of Hysteria,
Mm,
and you can find it. It's on the internet. I got a PDF somewhere, um, and in it, it's like one of his earlier works, and in it he talks about the sexual abuse of children and trauma
mm,
and how
mm-hmm,
that can cause problems over time.
mm-hmm,
And and then he steps back from that in his work. He steps back and he comes up with like, oh, the Oedipal complex or the Electra complex, where
mm-hmm,
the child has to deal with their nascent sexuality, and so they project it
mm-hmm,
onto the
mm-hmm,
parent, and
mm-hmm.
we all want to have sex with our parents on some
Yeah.
level, and some
Right.
not in a direct way, but
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
sexual urge gets projected onto the parents, and maybe there's something to that, but a lot of that was an unwillingness to face the traumatic abuse that may have been going on in these Victorian, very suppressed, very neurotic households.
Mm,
And I think that interests me because it feels like Western psychology at its birth had a chance to get into trauma and the effects of trauma,
mm,
um, and chose not to, or wasn't able to, or could, Freud could only make it so far up, and then he couldn't get over the top of that,
mm,
too much social resistance. Um, and then social resistance brings me back to the superego. Um, because in Plato, I very much see a sort of a rudimentary model of our sort of the three parts of the human brain, right? So you've got the brain stem, which is just survival.
mm,
It keeps the heart beating, it keeps the lungs going, but it also has a lot of instinctual stuff, and so is very could be akin to the monster. Definitely is
mm,
akin to the id. It's
mm,
where a lot of the like eruptive emotions come from. I don't want to say eruptive emotions. They don't actually come from the brainstem, but the panic of the brainstem can power those emotions, or
mm,
the maybe it's more to say the amygdala, the fear part of the brain, is able to activate the brainstem, and so there's some sort of a relationship there,
mm,
um, where a lot of the very strong reactions are in touch with this. The things we would call our monsters are very in touch with that.
mm,
And then you have the rational part, which is like the front of the brain, the sort of human part of the brain that's able to do calculations and logically think things through. And then you have the emotional part of the brain, which is
mm,
vaguely mammalian, vaguely animalistic,
mhm,
and also has a lot of socialness to it. So it's where
mm,
we get our emotions generally. It's where the amygdala is, but it's also um, how we feel other people. Like if we walk into a room
mm,
and somebody in that room is angry,
Mm.
We kind of know that, regardless of if they're, if the whole room, everybody's just tight and kind of
Mm.
nervous, and there's somebody in the corner who's just like, you can feel just being grumpy, like that
Mm-hmm.
felt sense of other humans, like that's that middle. And that's
Mm.
that lion part. I see it, that's like around politics, wanting to dominate, find your
Mm.
place in the social hierarchy.
Mm.
Um, Going to war or sports events, that's a lot of
Mm.
emotion being shared and being,
Mm.
you're in this emotional kind of milieu.
Mm-hmm.
And I can see that being, that being akin to the lion, to sort of the beast.
Mm.
It's because the thing with Plato is you have a monster and you have a lion. And I'm somewhat surprised at that, because I feel like for me, at our point in Western civilization, a lion is instinctual. It is bestial. It's going to take what it wants. It's going to conquer other, it's going to fight. And all of that
Mm-hmm.
feels very akin to a monster to me.
Mm-hmm.
The lion, a little more noble. Um, as I said, the earlier, like the nobility, the regalness, kind of comes into play with the lion. Um, but it's just interesting to me that I find my own psyche or soul sort of divided differently than maybe either of the examples we're looking at.
Mm.
I'm not sure I could be like, oh, well, mine's divided this way, but it like they don't quite seem to, the symbols don't quite seem to speak to me
Mm.
in the same way. Yeah, I don't know if you have anything to
Mm.
say to that.
I guess with uh if you I mean if people have a lion part, do you think that is formed partially from the society, how you're treated, how your sort of sense of self forms, whether you want, you start to want a lot of praise from people, things like that.
Mm, mm. Yeah, that is interesting. I mean, I guess I look at it as, when we're born, there's some sort of true essence to ourselves. And I
Mm.
think I'm gonna guess, I'm not really, I'm gonna try and speak from my own experience, but I'm gonna guess that this is going to line up with the teachings of George Gurdjieff, who I
Mm.
am interested in. He's a Armenian mystic taught in Russia around after World War One, right before the Russian Revolution. So I've spent a lot of time studying his work. I haven't actually done much practice in groups and things, so I can't claim any kind of expertise. But he had a system, a structure, and I think I'm probably going to fall into that. So, um, homage aside, um, that there's sort of something we come into the world with, and and then we meet the world with it, and we find that it doesn't quite naturally fit into the world in a normal way. So then we have to compensate, you know. Um, I guess in some trauma theory, I'm thinking Gabor Mate off the top of my head is, I think, probably where I heard this. But the idea that when we're born, we have two drives, and one is the drive to authenticity, to express ourselves authentically and be genuine. I want a thing, I'm going to go and get it. And not even like I must have it, but just like a child toddling towards like a toy that they like. Like they just go for
Mm.
it. They don't think about it. They're genuinely following their desires. And
Mm.
then the other side is the need for connection. And especially as a human, we're very weak as children. We're not able to defend ourselves. We're very dependent. And
Mm.
so almost always connection will win out over authenticity when there's some
Mm.
sort of a friction between the two, because
Mm.
as much as we might want to do a thing if we think we're going to be abandoned by our parents or get in very big trouble or yelled at, then we won't, and we'll suppress that part of ourselves. And then you get all the neurotic outplays that suppression can bring.
Mm-hmm.
And we kind of hang on to that connective self. And then we start to think that there's a an animosity between the two, that
Mm-hmm.
we can't ever have connection. This might be a little bit too revealing of my own psychological issues, but we think we can't ever have connection and authentically be ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
When really they're just like the horses you're talking about. They're, one is kind of going after our aims and our goals, and the other one is finding a way to do that that doesn't alienate us from society.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I can see the lion being sort of the authentic part, the sort of, roar. I am
Mm-hmm.
myself. Um, and I can see the rational part being at least somewhat, well, I have to get along with all these people, so I might as well not rock the boat. But in both of those cases, I sort of feel a lack of an acknowledgement of the values of belonging and of community and of sort of the energy that can build in a group that is cohesive and loving towards each other,
Mm-hmm.
you know. Um, I suppose you could sort of lump that in under the line with the like the political and the sort of social element of it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like where does love come in? Where does care come in?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Compassion, you know. Maybe they didn't feel the need to explain that. Maybe that was obvious back to the Greeks in a way that we're a little alienated from. I'm not sure. Um, but yeah, yeah. Small side note, I did do a little bit of research and found out that there may actually have been lions in Greece back like in I think like 1300 BC is maybe the oldest evidence.
Huh.
So they would have come up from Africa in through like the Bosporus and then down into Greece.
Wow. I
But
didn't know that.
I think that's the current thing. Because I was curious of like, oh, is like what would the lion have symbolized to a Greek person?
Mm.
Not what does the lion symbolize to me, who has seen lions in zoos and
Mm-hmm.
safari parks,
Yeah.
and Chronicles of Narnia and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
But what would it have been like? Like, because I was curious, like, oh, would they have considered the lion a foreign thing? But no, it sounds like not. Like it would have been local. It wouldn't have been like, oh, some far away, distant goal,
Mm-hmm.
something to sort of look up to, the wise being in the wilderness. I could see that being
Mm.
potentially a symbol of the lion, but I don't think it was meant that way. So I was
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
I agree. As far as I can tell, yeah, it's more like uh Plato seems kind of cautious about that the lion, because his ultimate sort of goal is sort of the spiritual enlightenment. Literally in the allegory of the cave, in the Republic, where they talk about this psychological theory, it's about freeing yourself from illusion and literally making it to the light where you can see not the shadows of reality, but reality itself.
Mhm.
But as for what you were talking about with authenticity and compassion and these things that link us with others, what I was thinking is you could view that from a different lens of like authenticity. Sometimes I think you can assume too much about authenticity that it is good. But I think a lot of things about how humans, let's say, naturally are, can lead to a lot of bad things. I mean, I think a lot of criminal behavior is very authentic. It's raw, to use another word that's sort of a synonym maybe for authenticity. Uh, and and yeah, but I was also thinking that sometimes under the umbrella of thinking about authenticity is it's like we are who we are, and we're supposed to naturally be that. But then this is a very Rousseauian view, or sort of decadent Rousseauian that's kind of come into our culture. I think I've read Emile and seen that he's much more different than the sort of Rousseau that we take. But anyway, there what we take is in Rousseau too, though. But yeah, it's this idea that we do have a natural nature to our soul, and that needs to be expressive. And it's this sort of the modern world we live in, the Nietzschean world of where the artist is the highest sort of form of person. And society tends to, yes, suppress, and then we get all sorts of psychological neuroses from that suppression. But yeah, it's this sort of like the question I was asking about how you think the lion part of us is formed. And I think that can maybe shed some light on the thinking about authenticity, because I wonder if a lot of the outward facingness of us, and how we want to supposedly express ourselves to others and connect to others, uh, is like socially formed, is based on what we deeply know is esteemed. Uh,
Mhm. Yeah, that's interesting because that brings me right back to Gurdjieff. In the He talked about the difference between essence, which again, I'm people can come in and probably tell me that I'm completely misquoting him, but this is my
mm,
understanding. So
mm,
this is my understanding of what I learned from reading his theory. That
mm,
there's an essence, there's something that's genuinely ours, and then there's a personality that gets put on top of it in the very
mm,
traditional like Greek persona, the mask,
mm,
the sort of fake presentation we give to the world that somewhere in us we know is fake and it doesn't quite fit us, but we know
mm,
we have to do it to fit into the world. Um, and the problem becomes, as I understand it, that we can get so well. Actually, this reminds me the personality of Gurdjieff. He talks about both personality and then I think false personality, or some sort of
mm,
like there's like a further extension of it. Um, and that some level of fakeness of fitting in is necessary and is okay. You're in a world, you have to adjust to it.
mm,
But then there's also like there this is I don't quite understand, but the way I understand it is there's some sort of a further extension where it becomes a negative thing. Like you start working
mm,
against yourself, or you're lying
mm,
specifically to achieve certain ends that you wouldn't be able to achieve otherwise. So it's like
mm,
a doubling down in some sort of a negative way, and that can obviously go quite bad.
mm,
But the other side of things, to get back to your question about the lion, the other side of things is and the criminals too, what you were saying, the sort of rawness of criminality and
mm,
authenticity. In Gurdjieff's thought, the essence is often arrested at a young development. And
mm,
so if we link that up with authenticity, like our authentic selves can be truly authentic and socially problematic because those parts of ourselves are still very young. They never were able to express themselves and learn and grow and play and be challenged by the world. And so when we go back and we get in contact with them, they can seem very raw. They can seem very rough. They can seem very rude, disrespectful, problematic. They're going to get us in trouble.
mm,
And it's a complicated place to stand where you're like, oh, this part of myself is genuinely me. It's an authentic thing. And I feel like it's going to get me in a lot of social trouble.
mm,
And I the here we enter the realm of neuroses, of the things that our mind does to avoid a problem that it doesn't know how to face, but just
Mm,
ends up sort of chasing them around and never actually hitting the sore spot, the actual sore spot.
mhm,
Um, and I think so being able to say, oh, this is authentically me, and I need to find a way to relate to it and have it express itself such that it doesn't disturb my life.
mhm,
Um, if I am very angry, but I don't know how to experience my anger, and every time I try and express it, it causes a lot of problems,
mm,
and I can't integrate that helpfully. But at the same time, you're not going to, you know, exercise your anger. You're not just going to cut it out. It's built into something very deep. And so
mhm,
how to relate to that part in a healthy way, help it find expression in a way that doesn't put a hole in your wall, you know, um, and then find the part that's angry and educate it.
mm,
I don't know much about Rousseau, but if I remember correctly, he was big on educating children
mhm,
properly. So
mhm,
maybe he comes in here. I don't know anything about Rousseau. That's about all I've got. But
mm,
this sort of educating these initial parts of ourselves and integrating them more with the adult persona, so that the persona, even if it is a mask, it's alive from within. It's lit up from within,
mm,
you know. And if anything, I would say maybe that the negative personality, the sort of false persona, whatever you want to call it, is something that is neurotic. It is actively trying to dim the light instead of just protect it.
mm,
Um, so maybe there's that. But I don't know if you can speak to Rousseau, or how he, this sort of idea of um, the line coming about because of a mix between trying to get our authentic needs met in a society and how we do that. I
mm.
don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think this stuff is kind of different from Plato. I feel like, yeah, I feel like we can put the thinker you're talking about, at least what you're saying, and these kind of things, kind of under the umbrella of Rousseau,
Hmm.
and who's basically, everything natural is good. And, he has the famous beginning line of this, what's the book called now? It's like his most famous work. I'm sorry, I forget, but it's like,
Hmm.
man is born, excuse me, man is born free, but is found everywhere in chains. Of course, it's very beautiful line and inspiring to many noble and also horrible actions. Um, but yeah, I think it's essentially, yeah, everything natural is good, and then if things that are based in nature end up coming out, so to speak, in a bad way, it's because, yeah, of wrong education or wrong societal education or something like that.
Hmm.
I think where all this stuff differs from Plato is that there is no sort of transcendence. There is
Hmm.
like a coming into it's like the highest development is like a coming into who you always were, and to there to be a harmony like between yourself and all of nature, and nature meaning not just natural things but the whole world, including artificial things.
Right, 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 right.
Which is
Hmm.
interesting. I heard recently that people used to call what we call the environment nature, and nature is maybe a better way of thinking about it, of reality, but anyway,
Hmm.
yeah, yeah. So, but either way, so that's different from Plato, but it's similar to Plato in that it seems like the the goal maybe of balancing the parts of the self is to reciprocally, as you're doing that, to come into greater contact and realization of the world outside of your body as well, and to sort of have this
Hmm.
harmony and everything.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. The harmony. Yeah, like the harmony, the role of transcendence. Like what is it that you are transcending, and what does it
Mm,
mean to
exactly.
transcend, and how does
Yeah,
that relate to nature?
that's right. Yeah.
Is certainly not an easy question to answer, but I think that's where the crux of the problem lies. If we're comparing Rousseau, as you have described him, of like, oh, everything is natural and good, and then problems arise and you have to sort them out somehow. You have to educate, you have to blend, you have to mix. Um, and then if the end goal of that is akin to Freud, you're a better human being. You exist. Things are smooth going. Everything's fine. Then you haven't really transcended, and you are just sort of at that same level and just making it work for the time being, and who knows how long that's going to last. Whereas with transcendence, you pop out of that level entirely,
Hmm.
and you are no longer swayed so much by how am I fitting with this? How is this going? It's sort of like everything is sort of the same. I mean, I come at that level. My most of my education on that front is Buddhist, so my ontology is very Buddhist. It's
Mm,
the unstainable lotus. It's the thing that nothing sticks to.
mm,
You're just as fine, begging in the street as you are sitting in a palace. You're still like there's something you are unswayed by things. But I
mm,
think I think there's a danger there, just as there's a danger with Rousseau of being sort of stuck without that transcendent level. There's a
mm.
danger if you look at that transcendent level as a goal, as a thing to be achieved. Oftentimes we do that through alienating parts of ourselves. A
Yeah,
Buddhist
yeah.
teacher I used to work with would compare being perfect to being whole, and that when you're aiming to be perfect, you're always trying to seal away parts of yourself. I don't want to deal with this is not good. This doesn't belong. No, 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 no.
Yeah,
And you're
yeah.
trying to find perfection by like negation and alienation of
Mm,
certain things. Whereas wholeness, you're like, oh, well, this and this and this and this doesn't work, but it belongs, and you can generate something from that.
mm,
For me, my uneducated guess, in that this is not an experience I have had, but it's my hope that as we would develop in the Rousseauian sense, as we come into contact with these more genuine parts of ourselves, educate them, clean them up, grow them, integrate them, that there's the possibility there of those parts actualizing something higher in us that
hmm,
helps us move beyond them.
hmm,
But they have to be harmonious first.
mm,
And
hmm,
so to have the dichotomy between authenticity or harmony or something, and say that this will never lead to um, illumination, will never lead to transcendence, is to leave something behind that is a key ingredient. Now, if you, I'm a Jungian too. If you look into alchemy, you always start with the base matter. You always start
mm,
with lead. You turn lead into gold. You start with the
mm,
the the the, the shit. It's often the nigredo, the
mm,
blackening, the
mm,
putrefying. Like you go into that's where the alchemical journey starts. Is you start with shit and with mud and with blood, just blood, and you cook that in the alchemical container until certain reactions happen.
mm,
Um, and to me, that's Rousseauian. That's educating our uneducated, authentic selves until they can start to flourish. Um, and just to bring in another reference, because I like making random references, Thich Nhat Hanh, the esteemed Buddhist teacher, one of his sayings that I always have loved is "No mud, no lotus," and I think
yeah,
that is a
yeah,
very concise description of the entire like self-development,
yeah.
transcendent process.
Completely. I
Yeah.
completely agree. Yeah, and I read something that he'd written about that, and I just thought that I told other people about that. I agree that that is such a beautiful and concise way of talking about personal spiritual development and enlightenment. I mean, that's just maybe the most concise and wonderful thing. And it's just wonderful that that's my understand that's really how it is in nature too. The lotus flower really does grow from the mud, right? So
Mhm.
it's not only just a terrific myth, but it's a real thing. So
Yeah. Yeah. It's a literal
yeah, I shouldn't say
poetic
real, but
element of
it's literal.
reality.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Because it does. It grows, as far as I understand, it grows in the mud at the bottom of the pond. So you have to go
Yeah.
down into the dark, into the mud, find the seeds there, bloom them open, and then it will grow up through the darkness. And then all of a
Yeah.
sudden, you've got this beautiful flower that's up in the light, which is very platonic. It's very in the
Yeah.
cave. You have to
Yeah.
be in the cave. You have
Yeah,
to,
exactly.
free yourself. If you're the seed, you have to free yourself from the container of the seed so that you can root and you can grow up and you can
Right.
become the lotus,
Yeah.
and then eventually
And
you
you're still
flower
fed.
and you're
Mm.
still fed. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. I think maybe some of the differences in what we're talking about is just like, yeah, different people or societies will be attracted to different kinds of worldviews. But either way, I think we're all in an agreement that in general, yeah, we seem to have different parts and we want to harmonize them and we want to, yeah, in some way become more or better than we were before. We don't want to kind of stay the same and feel better, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
which I think
Yeah.
sometimes isn't that kind of a danger of therapy. It's just like I read recently a an analysis of Tony Soprano,
Mm.
and you know the show The Sopranos, and he went into therapy, and the analysis claimed that he basically used therapy to stop feeling bad about what he was doing and to become a more effective like criminal and murderer, you know, because it's
Wow.
like I don't you saw the show and
I mean, when it
or
was
some of
out,
it.
yeah, yeah. I watched the whole thing, but back when it was, broadcast
Yeah.
live, so
Yeah.
it's been a while. Yeah.
Mm. But yeah, but just in general, the arc of the show does seem like he started off the show like and he's like he's getting troubled and he has like the ducks like settling in his pool and the it's like a duck with her ducklings or something like that and he really loves seeing them and kind of it's like very different from like a gangster, right? He's like nurturing and he's like very upset when they leave, but then he goes on, he keeps committing these crimes and keeps doing the analysis and with his therapist and eventually he's like killing his nephew, his like heir to be and everything, and so
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah, oh sorry.
Well, I mean, I'll just be brief. It's if I remember correctly, it's the idea of like the refusal of the call in like a Joseph Campbell sense. Like he's called
All
to
right, yeah,
respect, to turn inwards and find what it is in him that these ducks are evoking,
yeah,
and to start
right,
respecting that over the power and the control and the mobster behavior and like all of that. And he doesn't. He chooses to keep doing the things that are maintaining his outward life while completely ignoring this inward call of, hey, this part of you needs attention. And if I remember the end of the series, it doesn't go well for him. I think he ends up like, or he gets shot. I think or maybe he has a
does
heart
he
attack. He dies, I think, at the end, if I remember correctly,
does he I thought
one way or
he
another.
was like continuing on, but anyway, yeah, yeah,
I don't
he's
remember. It's been years and
but
years.
we can
So
agree, I think he went the wrong way.
yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good analysis. Yeah, he and by the way, that was part of the thing I read by Rob Henderson
Hmm.
that yeah, the show is so amazing because it's this truly complex anti-hero. And it's not like this simple sort of just psychopath that just want, yeah, he's like he cares for his children. He makes sure they never are going to go into that life and everything. But yeah. But yeah, that's a good analysis. That's a good thought that yeah, he has the calling for a different life. He realizes it. He's troubled by what he's doing. But then, yeah, unfortunately, that other part, which I would maybe say is the lion part,
Mm,
uh, if we want to go with Plato, that kind of he still wants the power, the mansion, the and as the show goes on, he wants to change maybe, but he feels hemmed in by his position,
hmm.
and but he could, well, maybe give up his position. But anyway, he does, to grow spiritually, he does need to give up the position. To you can't be like the dictator of North Korea or something and be like, okay, I'm still gonna like be a good person. Like,
Yeah.
no. Like
Yeah.
you
It
have to
just
be
like,
killing people like a lot to be in that position, you know?
so you can't be the dictator of North Korea and be a nice person. You have to be killing people to be a dictator. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, you're right. Um, and it very clear to me you're talking about Plato's cave in that the house and the mobster behavior and the power and the control, shadows on the wall, they don't actually feed you, that you're not, your soul isn't made happy by any of this. It doesn't resolve
Yes.
any of
Yes.
your angst about being alive and what the fuck why are these ducks, why do I care,
Yeah.
and if you can, you have to tear yourself away from that and stumble through the dark and up the stairs, which are, I'm sure, difficult to climb,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
shed everything that's holding you there, that keeps you there, undo your chains, metaphorically speaking, to
Yeah.
find the sun. And here we have the alchemical practice again, because in my imagination, at least, one of the things that would keep Tony Soprano stuck in his mobsterhood would be to really listen to the call of those ducks. You have to see how far you have lived from that. He'd have to see how much violence he had done and how much pain and suffering he had caused. And that's the shit. You have to put the shit in the container and cook it. You have to look at some unpleasant things about yourself. And
That's really good. Yeah. And that's probably, I would speculate that's what he's trying to use therapy, which he should use therapy to do. He uses therapy to not do.
mhm,
And there's a lot there. I mean, there's a lot of crimes there by the time he's reached his position that he would have to face, and to really go through the dark nights of the soul to really like realize what he's done.
mhm, mhm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think what we're talking about there is probably a pretty good definition of karma, because it's not,
Right.
it's
Yeah.
not so much that like, oh, you did a bad thing and the universe is going to kick you in the ass. It's like
Yeah.
you did a bad thing and now you're going to have to back out of that, and you're going to have to see that you've been doing a bad thing in order to recognize I need to stop doing a bad thing, and that is painful in and of itself. To see that, to experience yourself as the perpetrator of evil deeds, is a painful
Yeah.
thing to see. But you
Yeah.
have to see it to stop doing them. If you're doing them and you don't see
Right.
that you're doing them, you're going to keep
Exactly.
doing them because you think
That's
you're doing whatever it is you think you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you were
Yeah.
thinking of the goals or the impulses that were driving you when you were doing the bad things, not the sort of the wholeness of it, to sort of bring it back to wholeness and holiness, related
Mm.
words.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. And I think this might be, I forget what's next on the document, but I know somewhere in there you talk about um, self-making and virtuous cycles, or virtual engines, virtuous cycles. It's sort of
Hmm.
like
Hmm.
generating a life that supports character development and the growth towards wisdom and transcendence and whatnot.
Hmm.
And I think one of the things when I read your notes on this, I was thinking was like, oh, that sounds like karma. That sounds like, building good karma.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
and I think we've just sort of naturally sort of shifted into that here, in that,
Yeah.
like, if you want to do therapy in the right way and not use it as a tool to justify further degradation, which you can do anytime you take that step, anytime you go on this particular journey of self-discovery, I feel like you're often presented with the choice of either taking the hard road, which is complicated, or taking the easy road, but there's not really much of a straightforward. You're either kind of going
Mm.
up or going down, or
Mm.
at least it's helpful to look at it that way. And like,
Mm.
am I taking this in a growth way, am I trying to confront some of my behaviors? Am I trying to grow and become a better, holier person? Or am I trying to just keep doing the same thing? And
Yeah.
if you're actively trying to address these things and you don't, you kind of end up reinforcing your separation from them.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
becomes the negative cycle, because then you have to work your way out of all of that.
Right.
And
Yeah.
then at a certain point you get to a place where you're like, well, I've only got so much life and I don't have the 20, 30 years I need to dig myself out of this hole. Although also there are miracles, there are conversion experiences, there are, spontaneous enlightenments. There's Paul on the
Yeah, I was
road
thinking of
where
that.
just yep, yeah, I saw your post the other day. Yeah. Paul definitely not a good guy in that moment. And yet Christ appears to him and he has this conversion, this transformative experience and is transformed on the other side, or at least something you had implied he was sort of cared for by the Christians in the community he was going to persecute. So there's an intense lesson for him there. He had to intensely face his darkness and he did apparently because he got to the point of being Paul instead of Saul.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So that seems good. So maybe next we can transition from like just talking about Plato's kind of maybe a criticism or just a characterization of it is that it's like a static view of the soul and you're trying to harmonize it in order to be in contact with the good and to sort of have the wisdom to know when you're deceiving yourself into his student Aristotle who instead of the sort of mathematical models he used more like mathematical metaphors. He used like biological metaphors and was all about development and character and everything.
Mm. Mm. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So then, yeah, so Plato's student Aristotle kind of tried to account for development. You know, he was very close to his father, who was a doctor, and he used a lot of biological metaphors. Um, So yeah, I guess Aristotle came up with the idea of character, which is not your personality, which is more like sort of what you're sort of born with. But your character is something that you can refine with cultivation, and it's a consequence of your experiences and how you have applied yourself in action and decision. So it's sort of formed over your life. And Aristotle had this idea called the golden mean. And it's sort of like using your sort of intuition and your rationality to kind of find the sweet spot when you're developing your virtues and to not be like, for instance, if you're trying to develop your courage, you're trying to know when when are you being courageous and when or how much action might be actually foolhardiness.
Hmm.
Or, on the other hand, when you're being cowardly or timid or something like that. So you're trying to, the virtues are this sweet spot between like too much and too little.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean that to me is very. I would come at that concept from the middle path. The Buddha was always
Right. Yeah.
a lot of his teachings were about like not this and not that. And when I'm working with people or when I'm talking with people, I often use the idea of like you can fall off a horse on either side. If
Yeah.
you're right, you got to ride the horse, but like if you fall to the left, you fall off, and you lean too far to the right, you fall off. If you're too much of a coward, you're not being courageous, and if you're too foolhardy, you're not being courageous, and there being some sort of a maybe I don't know, all good things requiring that kind of balance. I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't know. What do you think?
No, I think I would think so. Yeah. Uh, and yeah, in terms of developing yourself over time so that you can know better how to be. That seems like a very good thing. So you talked about the middle path, like how do you develop yourself? I know with like Buddhism, you have like mindfulness, and that seems very mindfulness training, not just mindfulness. And that seems to me like a very, very good way of starting to develop, like, because you have to have a sense of what to do, right? It's not like it's not obvious. Things are really, really complex in life, right? Many, many moving parts. And ideally, you're kind of knowing what to do virtuously in the moment and not later on when you can't do anything about it, right? And
Yeah.
isn't mindfulness partially a way to sort of start to know so that you kind of maybe can more sense like what's going on, including what's going on with yourself, right? Because
Mm.
maybe sometimes your own psychology is getting in the way of your being able to somewhat accurately assess the situation that you're in.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, I got a couple of things I want to say to that. One, um, the term mindfulness is one of my particular uh crusades, I guess. The original Sanskrit, I believe it's Sanskrit. Maybe I'm confusing my Sanskrit and my Pali, but the original
Hmm.
term was sati,
Hmm.
in the Buddhist scriptures, and a more proper translation of sati is, so I have been told.
Hmm.
I'm no Sanskrit scholar. A
Hmm.
more proper translation is memory of the present, memory of
Yeah.
the present moment, and mindfulness has it be like, I have to be thinking about the present moment while I'm in it.
Yeah.
And memory of the present moment is like, to me anyway, the way that speaks to me is when you remember something, it's like you're there. You're present for that particular experience.
Yeah.
And are you present to the present moment? Are the mental faculties that you engage when you have a strong memory, when you're trying to recall, where was I? What was I doing? Or even what was that dream I had last night? Like you're trying to summon up a whole experience with parts of your mind. Are those parts of your mind actually active in the present moment? Are you, because one of the first, the Satipatthana Sutra, I think, if I'm stumblingly pronouncing that anywhere near correctly, um, the mindfulness of breathing. It's about being actually present and knowing I'm breathing in deeply, I'm breathing in slow, softly, lightly. I'm breathing. In the Buddha sutras, they list all the different ways you could think of it, somewhat
Wow.
exhaustively.
Mm.
But I think what they're pointing to is, are you breathing in a way that if I asked you, how were you breathing in 5 minutes, you would have anything to recall? Most of the time, our breathing is very unconscious. Are you
Mm.
are you consciously aware of your breathing? Are you and this actually gets into something later in your thing about knowing, what was conformity?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
I think it's a similar thing of Aristotle's, of like, are you conforming with the present moment? Are you knowing it with your being and not just
Yeah.
thinking about it? Because when
Yeah.
you're thinking about it, you're thinking about it as a concept. You're,
Yeah.
you're
Exactly. Yeah.
conceptualizing the present moment and you're thinking about that concept.
Yeah.
You're completely alienated from the actual present moment. You're
Yeah.
you're you're creating this model that you're looking at. And that's
Yeah.
fine. You've got a modeling part of your brain, but what you want to do is have that modeling part of your brain be something you're aware of happening in the present moment,
Yeah.
so that
Yeah.
it is not other or separate or alienated from your body,
Yeah.
from your sense of the space around you, from the smell of the tea steeping on your desk, from
Yeah.
the view out the window, like and then you come into that wholeness that we were talking about.
Right.
We're no
Yes.
longer, the parts of ourselves are no longer seemingly fractured from each other.
Right.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So heck, I went a long way on that and I forgot what else we were talking about. Yeah, yeah, the golden mean. So I think
Yeah.
that ties back in really well with what we were saying earlier about like Tony Soprano and the Ducks and the like, because one of the ways I think we can get confused with the golden mean or the middle path or whatever it is if our experiences are all on one side of it, and we're either completely
Wow.
unaware of, or we're like actively avoiding the, like, say we're so afraid of being a coward that
Right.
we're
Right.
always a bit foolhardy because we don't want to be seen to be chicken shit. We don't want somebody to call us a
Right.
pussy or whatever.
Right.
Excuse me for the language, but
Hmm.
that's the language that's used. That's the language that's used to
Yeah.
attack us as men in this world,
Yeah.
and so we sort of glom onto the, well, I'm going to be brave, I'm going to be, and sometimes you get in trouble, but you're like, well, I didn't want him to think I was
Yeah.
some kind of weakling,
Yeah,
and that
exactly.
that you're off. But in order to have the full range so that you can find the middle, you would have to consciously, because your habit patterns are so stuck on one end, you'd have to consciously expand yourself and find a way to be cowardly, have an experience of cowardness and all of the emotional challenges and the grief that would come up, whatever would come up, who knows what would come up, but that would
Hmm.
be very challenging for somebody who is stuck on one side of the spectrum
Hmm.
to, and I'm thinking Saul here,
Hmm.
stuck persecuting, very angry,
Hmm.
as you pointed out in that post, like he goes blind and he has to be at the mercy of these people who he hated, and he has to come to terms with the fact that they're caring for him out of Christian love, out of agape,
Hmm.
out of compassion.
Hmm.
If we're talking more Buddhist, but they're caring for him despite that because he's helpless, and so he went from being power over, which is too much power, to completely at the the care of, or the mercy of these people that have every right to hurt him.
Hmm.
And so he's thrown to the other side, and then that gives him the full spectrum, and he's
Hmm.
able to find, at least to some degree, the middle way, the golden mean, where he's genuinely attuned to. It's almost like it's almost like an electrical circuit. Like when you find that golden mean, you're connected to some kind of transcendent energy that
Hmm.
then helps you grow your soul in a good, towards the good,
Hmm.
the true, and the beautiful. That's kind of
Hmm.
that alignment. And a sin is only a sin if it takes you out of that alignment, if it takes you out of the
Hmm.
the golden mean. And yet so often we think of sin as a moralistic, like,
Yeah.
uh shall and shall not, regardless of the circumstances or the needs or the placement in reality. But that if we don't understand the golden mean element of it, can become off center.
Yeah.
And then we think we are behaving in a good way when all we're doing is generating more neuroses for ourselves,
Yeah.
and bad karma, and further spiraling deeper into the cave.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I think about that with sin too. I've recently, through reading Vervaeke, sort of felt like sin became a more real and good thing, good concept for me. But yeah, that moralistic way was always how I understood it before, that legalistic way, which is probably a decadent idea. Because, right, the sin has to do with the idea of etymologically of missing the mark, right? So it's this idea, and Vervaeke talks about this, about getting things right, right? You're an archer and it requires this full harmony of you and the bow. And he adds something that's a touching kind of element where when an archer aims for the target, they actually have to aim a little above the target. So they have to have a sense of, it's not like I'm just slavishly kind of pointing my arrow right at the target. Like I have to sense from my deep experience and skill how to aim the arrow a little above the target and with the wind and all that stuff so that it'll hit it. So with this idea of sin, it's much more in line with developing this sense of the right way to go. So it's
Mm.
much more complex and less legalistic, not like, here's a sentence, don't do this in life. Here's a sentence, do this in life. The slavishly kind of. And then of course there's the idea like, okay, I'm I'm now a good person because I haven't done the first category and I have done the second category, and I'm good enough to judge other people. And and then you get into the whole, Pharisee stuff that Jesus, I think, was like constantly trying to argue people out of. Oh,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, um, and again, it man, that was great. I
yeah.
just kind of want to sit with that. But we're on a podcast. I can't sit with it. Again, I think we're talking about that golden mean. I think it's that like being able to hit the mark is being able to understand the range, the two sides of failure, and being able to stick with that place where the current flows, where there's some kind of aliveness where the distinction between you and the world kind of falls away, and
Yeah,
you're able
right.
to say, oh, you're not thinking, the wind is coming in at 45 degrees and therefore I must angle, because
Yes,
you don't have a
exactly right.
protractor. You're not
Yeah.
like measuring the
Yeah.
wind and the angle.
Yeah.
You're experiencing it. You're conforming, you're knowing it in that
Yeah.
embodied way. And you're feeling the gravity, and you know from experience that gravity will pull the arrow down, and so you have to compensate for that, and you have to compensate for the wind, and you have to know your aim, and you have to be able to achieve it.
Mm,
Um, and I think one of the big problems with moralistic sin is if you miss that shot, you're a bad person.
right.
And
Yeah.
so you shouldn't take it.
Right. Yes. Yes.
Whereas if sin is simply trying to align yourself in that way, where that sort
Mm,
of conformity or beingness with the world naturally arises, and you feel the information is intuited in you in an embodied way, and you're able to interact with it so that you aim right. If you miss, great, you tried, you had
yeah.
an aim, you shot for it, and next time you're going to do better if you keep that kind of attention, if you keep that kind of mindfulness, that memory of the present. If you're present in the moment with what you're doing, then you can then your sin, your missing of the mark, becomes a virtuous act, because
Yeah.
it is the foundation upon which you build the hitting of the mark,
Yeah.
and you're encouraged to continue instead of step back because you failed and never try again. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. That sounds good. So yeah, that to me seems like an idea of sin that is yeah, a way of developing yourself rather than on the legal model, something that requires punishment. Because there is a negative consequence to missing the mark and to sin, but that's more of a natural part of the development of yourself as you grow, rather than like, okay, I'm just going to be punished, and then when I come out of jail or the stocks or whatever kind of metaphor you want to use, I'm still the same person.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think the oh, this is so good. Oh man. Okay. What you're talking about with punishment and when you come out of jail, it had me think of this Tony Soprano again, and that element of therapy, and of sort of missing the mark with therapy. That in therapy, if he had done therapy well, he would have moved out of who knows if this was possible, but just
Mhm.
as a theoretical, imaginary exercise,
Mm,
had he hit the mark in therapy, it would have processed him out of the mobster behavior, and it would have become virtuous.
mm,
Whereas he missed the mark of the therapy. He barricaded himself against the truths that were coming up from his soul, and that led to sin in the moralistic sense. That led to the degradation of his soul and his being and his purpose in the world, or whatever you want to call it. Because he wasn't willing to aim for what his soul was calling for. And if he had kept trying, he would have eventually achieved a thing, and then all of his failures would have been steps towards achieving that transcendence, or that even just on a minor level, the abandonment of the mobster lifestyle. It would have been uh, going legit, and then struggling with the tendency to slide back into the mobster life, and kind of continuing to kind of work your way on that path. If you fail, but you stay on the path, and you stay trying to grow and trying to aim, every failure becomes a growth process. But if you fail, and you stop trying, or you misinterpret the failure, or you become moralistic, or there's any number of ways that you can not hit the target. You can miss above, you can miss below, you can miss to the side, you can shoot
Mm,
somebody in the leg, like whatever.
mm,
Um, but you're not hitting that target. You're not sticking to that mean. You're not trying to find that place where the transcendent current flows in that present moment through with including your own activity.
mm,
Um, and yeah, and so I can see sin as moralistic. I can see sin as the road to damnation, but the deciding factor is how you respond to it,
mm,
you know. If you take sin to mean missing the mark, if you miss the mark and you keep missing the mark, and you don't, if you're not mindful enough to the present moment to understand what is happening and continue to aim at something good, then you start to fall away further and further, and that is damnation. That is the road to hell. But if you keep aiming and you keep trying to get it right, or but there you run into the danger of perfectionism. So anytime I try and explain it perfectly, I always end up coming into something that contradicts myself, which I think is more to do with the nature of reality than anything
mm.
else.
Yeah.
But but yeah,
But, mm.
go ahead. Go ahead.
No, no, I was going to say, yeah, I think, yeah, the good thing is to remember how you respond to it. Yeah. And of course, someone could try to be self-deceptive here and try to say, and really they just want to keep doing the thing and then justify it by what we're saying. Like, oh, I didn't give up. Like I kept trying, but you're not, and I think this is also the idea of Tony Soprano's intent in therapy was to feel better, not to be better.
Mm,
And someone just repeating their sin without trying to change, without the intention to face reality of who they are. I think that's important to remember too. Is like, what is your true intent? And of course, wisdom helps you to develop that sense so that you're starting to see, oh, am I kind of BSing myself here? Like maybe I'm just kind of using using this thought as an excuse to just keep doing what I want to be doing. And of course, I might be signaling that I'm trying to change, or I might show that I'm really upset about not changing, but I might kind of not really have the intent of changing.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's sneaky. That's sneaky to be like, I'm doing all this to change, and sort of unconsciously hiding from yourself that you're not.
Yeah.
You're not. You're really just trying to do the same thing over and over again, um, in the hopes that you can get away with it.
Yeah.
You know, and you can't, and ultimately you can't because your soul, your higher self doesn't want to,
Yeah.
because you're missing the point of being human and being alive, and like that's what we're here to be, is to strive for that transcendence, is to evolve and mature ourselves, to grow our soul. I mean, in the Bible you have the parable of the talents. Like the master is going away and he gives money to the servants. He gives like five talents to one person, two to another person, and one to the third person. And the first person takes the money and goes and invests it and gets a return on it and has 10. And the second one goes and invests it and gets a return on it and has 4. And the first one's very nervous, or the last one's very nervous with 1, and buries it in the backyard. And then when the master comes back, he's like, "Here, I saved your money for you." And the master's like, "No, you're fool. You were supposed to do something with it."
Right.
Um, and I just think that that's a elegant way of talking about life. Like we come into life to with some sort of divine inheritance, some sort of possibility of transcendence, some sort of authentic, true, essential self, and we are supposed to do our best to engage that in the world and make something better of ourselves and the world together, while we can, while we're alive. And if we're doing that, or we're trying to genuinely do that, then we're building that virtuous cycle. And to the extent that we are not, or we decide we can't, or we decide that we need to do something that like it's impossible for us, so we just need to be comfortable. We're just going to be comfortable, you know. Never mind all that personal growth stuff or whatever. I mean, however, it might manifest for other people differently. I don't want to limit it to personal growth. I don't know. Maybe just being a good parent is your way of coming into the world or
Mhm.
being human, or maybe, you know, simply writing a book that helps other people or going to war. I mean, who knows? Who knows if you go to war for the right reasons? I mean, I think World War II was fought for the right reasons,
Mhm.
for example. World War One, not so much. But you know,
Mhm.
there's many ways that this can manifest, and the problem becomes finding out which one is yours
Mhm.
and not trusting somebody else's story over your own soul, even though your own soul can be very confused and your understanding of your own soul can be very confused. That's still the material you have to work with,
Yeah.
or you end up like Tony Soprano. You know, you end up running away from the ducks.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, something you said about Soprano's mansion being like the cave. I was also thinking it's like the palace, where with the story of the Buddha or sort of what Marcus Aurelius said, it's not like a good thing. It has a certain beauty, it has a certain majesty, and most people would think it's like the pinnacle of life, or
Hmm.
they might say it's the pinnacle of life. And it's in these spiritual sort of stories, it's the exact thing that you kind of want to get away from. And in Marcus Aurelius's case, he couldn't literally get away from it because he had his responsibilities as the emperor. But through his practice and his virtuous life, he was able to say, even in a palace, it is possible to be happy. So he
Mm.
developed that wisdom of realizing how unhappy the palace makes a human being, and but he was able to transcend that. But
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
I think that's a good message for us nowadays because so often, at least in my life, there's so often I have been like, oh, I should just go to a cave and be a hermit and be apart from society. And yet there's always this call of like, no, it needs to be in society. It needs to be amongst people. It needs to be in the palace. But and what you're saying about Marcus Aurelius, like he shows that you are able to bring that spark of the divine or of the transcendence, whatever, you're able to bring that out anywhere if you work at it. If it is not incompatible with any particular life. Some lives may be more challenging than others. But, I mean, for the Buddha to leave the palace and go and live in the jungles and the woods, also pretty challenging. So, choose your challenge, choose your poison, but like you're going to be it's not going to be easy either way. Like it's going to involve some sort of confrontation with things that are problematic.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I can kind of keep going through the sort of Aristotle kind of ideas, and we can kind of keep talking about them. Um, So, yes, a confrontational question happens with good sort of spiritual or philosophical development. So, the idea of the golden mean in character is to develop yourself. Um, and the question to ask yourself is, are you letting this process of your character development go unchecked? Or are you sort of mindful of it? Are you using your rationality to try to, yeah, to develop yourself?
Mhm. Me personally?
Oh, I don't know. Yeah, I'm just asking that question and kind of seeing where it goes.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's a good question. It's a good question. I mean, it had me think about me personally. Um, and it brings up a point of confusion
Mm.
that may be a personal thing or maybe more universally applicable. I'm sure I'm not the only one. But again, this may be more about myself than sort of general philosophy. But rationality and the mindfulness checking of this process that we're talking about, this sort of character development process, um, I find I rather mistrust rationality, or at least it depends on what the Greeks meant by that. But what I mean by that is just the intellectual, just the very scientific, just the measurable,
Hmm. Hmm.
the things I'm consciously aware of, very the sort of the Enlightenment era values,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah, very different rationality. Yeah, from
Yeah,
my understanding, from especially from Vervaeke. Yeah, very much
good.
narrower idea.
Well, yeah. So okay, so then that's the thing I have a problem with is I don't trust that Enlightenment era rationality to be able to handle and respect all of the elements with which I must contend to
Mm.
really engage in that human development process of
Yeah,
myself that is my life,
yeah,
you
I
know.
agree. Yeah.
Um, okay, well then fair enough. But yeah, I think my here I mean I don't have the background with Aristotle and Vervaeke, so you can tell me if this lines up with them or not. But my personal understanding of it would be um, rationality as akin to mindfulness, as akin to memory of the present, as akin to participatory knowing, as akin to like in the Gurdjieff work again, he talks about receiving impressions of something. The basic level is like, oh, you're seeing the tree outside, and you actually feel the experience of the tree as you're experiencing. You're not just thinking about the concept, but also like there's an element of actually being present for your life such that you aren't buffering yourself. You're not holding that experience at bay. You're having all of it that's to be had.
Mm.
And I think that's where the Enlightenment rationality misses the mark for me, is that it
Mm. Yeah.
often, this okay, so this is another one of my personal bugaboos that I guess is going to come into the conversation right now of the idea that objective reality defined in that Enlightenment sense is truer than subjective reality is, I think, cowardice. I think it is simply
Mm.
cowardice because your subjective reality is true. My subjective reality is true. They do not always agree,
Mm.
but they have an effect. They affect our behavior. They affect the way we exist in the world. They
Mm.
are built upon likely misunderstandings of the world and our place in it, and we need
Mm.
to undo those, but we can't ignore them.
Mm.
And the
Mm.
emphasis on the measurable, the observable, the recordable, and the universally true
Mm.
serves as a means of covering over all these places where there are very real effects happening from things that maybe we don't understand correctly and
Mm.
that require us to look at them more.
Mm.
Um, and I always think of subjectivity as the objective world sort of crinkled up on itself.
Mm.
So it's this deep maze, it's this kind of cavernous confusion of what is objectively true, but there is nothing in the subjective that is not of the objective world and that cannot be
Mm.
understood as a part of it if
Mm.
we come to know ourselves, the
Mm.
Greek over the Oracle of Delphi, know thyself, the
Mm.
sort of main, which I think was Socrates was into that too. Correct me if I'm wrong,
Mm.
but just that like coming to understand oneself.
Mm.
Um, I forget how I got there from Aristotle, so you'll have to rein me back in.
No, no, not at all. Yeah, I mean, I think that was like we're talking about rationality. Like we're essentially saying
Mhm.
what is it and what has it become in to us late modern people.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'd
Yeah,
agree that. Mm.
I was gonna say how would you define rationality, or what would you say on that?
Yeah, I mean, just from reading different philosophy and also Vervaeke especially, like I think yeah, it's not like it's not only propositional logic. I mean, I think developing that can be a good thing. And Plato talks about like in early education kind of developing kids like calculating ability with mathematics and everything. In the word rationality, we have ratio. So It's maybe the idea of being able to see. And so this is a little bit related to what you were saying about the measurable. And I think there is some value to that, like literally measuring the value of certain perceptions, like I'm jealous. How much of that is my development or how much of that is what I need to do in this relationship? And, you know, uh, there's all sorts of, yeah, in your life, your perception and your thinking, you do want to kind of see the value of different things and be able to proportion things, measure things, and kind of come to like a better understanding of them for going towards the good, the true, and the beautiful, towards having a harmony of the soul. But yeah, yeah, I agree that it is not this narrow, yeah, propositional logic where, according to Vervaeke, I think it's very convincing, where you get it developed into Hobbes and especially oh, who was the, I can't believe I'm blanking on the name, Hobbes and well, anyway, I remember one of the major thinkers of the Enlightenment,
Oh,
um,
Descartes.
Descartes. Thank you,
Yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember from
and
your notes. Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
Right, should have looked over at those, but yeah, where you have this, eventually, it's like, so the only thing I really know is myself, and I'm sort of trapped in my calculating brain. This whole world around me could just, including my own body, it's very possible that this is just some sort of illusion. There could be some kind of demonic force in the world that has, like the Matrix, has just made all this stuff. And, you can see how it leads to unhappiness, suspicion, just all sorts of negative things and no positive things, and definitely leads you away from a fullness of experience of life. And I think being a good person to others and everything, and I don't think it makes you smarter. I think it can make you sort of a stereotype rational atheist, sort of uh know it all, and you know everything except how to make yourself or others happy, you know.
Yeah.
You only know how to be like smarter than thou, and maybe you can feel superior in that way, which, not sure how why that's a good thing. So yeah, so I
Well,
agree that rationality is like is I think rationality is very important, and Aristotle distinguishes humans by their rationality. But yeah, it is not this, it is more like a participatory knowing. There's different kinds of knowing. It's in the body and in the world, and it is not this limited kind of using words logically and only, words and sentences and grammar and deductions and things like that. It is, yeah, not, it's not like that kind of thing.
yeah, yeah. I think, man, I got a lot of responses came up. Yeah, the that tendency to think that because you can make a very cutting rhetorical argument,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
somehow understand life better.
yeah,
Um, I get the appeal, but like I don't, that's not the path for me. I'm not trying to create better arguments. There's a poem by Hafiz, Sufi poet, which I'll just sort of paraphrase of like, he goes around dropping keys for people who are in prison.
mm,
Like that's what
mm,
that, if
mm,
we're talking prison, Plato's cave, locked up,
mm,
and like if I aim at anything in this life, I hope to be someone who's able to do that at some point. It's just
mm,
rather than having that rhetorical back and forth until one of us wins, having it be the dialogue, the dialogos
yeah,
that you talk about. It's that same thing of like maybe something in our conversation will help somebody, I hope, or maybe I'll get to the point where something in our conversation can help somebody.
yeah,
That's much more to it. But I think it's interesting. One of the things you said at the start of that was you were talking about the value of measurement and the sort of you talked about it in terms of like jealousy or sort of, and I just like that opened up this whole perspective for me of measurement and the sort of scientific experiment of hypothesis and experiment measurement and
Mm,
a
mm,
conclusion and all of that um as personal, because you can't there's no real way to measure jealousy
mm,
in such that like, well, I'm on a scale, I'm 8 of 10, but you're 9 of 10,
mm,
so therefore you're more jealous than me, and we
mm.
can measure that, but when it comes to, I'll speak from my own relationship here, my own experience, my own relationship experience, of jealousy, like I know I have been in, nothing against my wife, nothing current. This is a long time ago. I have been in relationships where I have been very jealous, and I can feel how that feels subjectively in my body. And I can measure that. I can say, wow, this action that my girlfriend or my ex-girlfriend took is making me, on a scale of the jealousy I've experienced, I'm now at 12 of 10. I've never felt this jealous before. Wow, this is a lot. This must be a lot. Let me, and then try and like, why is this happening? I don't know. There has to be some kind of inquiry there. But that
Yeah.
measurement, that measuring of the subjective experience is, I think, a step towards rationality, is a step towards being present with it and experiencing it as it is instead of being taken over by it and sort of playing out the shadows of what this jealousy means and what it says about me and all that stuff. And
Yeah.
all of that is worth looking at, but not being caught up in. Like
Yeah.
you are the experiencer of all of these things, and you are trying your best to, in that Greek sense, be rational about them, have that conformity of knowing about all of them, and sort of develop your actions based on what these parts of ourselves reveal to us,
Mm,
much better than, well, you can't measure jealousy, so it's just you're just being emotional, you're just being dumb. Like, why don't you just realize that no one owns anybody and nobody owes you anything? It's like
yeah.
technically true, but doesn't help with my broken heart or my anger
Yeah.
and my frustration.
That's right.
And
Yeah.
the only solution that offers me is to tell the jealous, angry, hurting parts of myself to shut the fuck up and sit down.
Yeah. Yeah.
And how we know enough about raising kids now to know that if every time a kid asks you a question, you say, shut up, sit down, children should be seen and not heard, that doesn't result in educated adults. It doesn't result in, valid members contributing to a healthy society. It
Mm,
results in a lot of problems in a problematic society over enough
mm,
generations. So we can start building a better society by the way we respond to these younger parts in ourselves, where we take them seriously on their own terms, but we do not let them dictate to us what our next action will be. We allow them to give us their dispensation, their whatever story it is that they're carrying. We don't block that, but
mm,
we don't have that become the whole story.
mm.
We hold the position of adult, or of authority, or rulership of that particular thing, in the initial sense, the original sense of being a king or a ruler, of like the servant leader. You are there to serve the people and to
Yeah.
sort of be the center point that helps make sense of the whole thing to grow the whole group together, as
Yeah.
opposed to like, well, I'm the king and you just do what I say,
Right.
which
Exactly.
is which is kind of which is again missing a mark there, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
The picture you painted of rationality, one thing I thought of is that it is a way of growing into deeper attention of it, but it's different than being overwhelmed by it, which is like also you're attentive to it, but you don't have like some healthy distance from it, right?
Hmm.
So yeah, that
Hmm.
and that again, that seems like some kind of middle path or golden mean. And also, I think in that process, yeah, you're developing your self-knowledge and your wisdom. And then, so yes, as you said, you're growing into like a more adult or more ruler type of person through
Yeah.
this. admittedly difficult experience.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. But yeah, you mentioning the golden mean kind of brought to mind, I think, another element that we haven't quite touched on yet, because it was sort of tangential. But if we're talking about the golden mean here in relating to these troublesome experiences or these troublesome parts of ourselves, like the one hand is being swept up in their story. You can fall off that way, and you can let the jealousy take over, and you can check your girlfriend's email to make sure she's not emailing people, even though she doesn't know you're doing that. And you can check their phone. You can, where were you? And all, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Um, or you can just be the other side is like, oh, well, I'm just observing these feelings. They're not touching me,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
that
Holier than
is,
thou. And yeah.
yeah, yeah. And you're just like, I think this is something you hear, I've heard a lot in different like yogic traditions, like Hindu traditions of like, just be the observer, just be, nothing touches you. And it's like that points to a truth, especially if you are oftentimes caught up. Being the
Yeah.
observer can put you sort of give you the fuller spectrum, but you can just as easily say, oh, well, I don't exist and there's no me and I don't have to deal with these feelings and they're not real.
Yeah.
Whereas the golden mean there is observer and problematic emotions are both true.
Yeah.
They're both valid. So you're able to hold them both at the same time and not overly identify with either of them. The question is, who are you when you're doing that? I don't really know. Maybe that's illumination, because you're able to sort of
Mm.
hold both in an open space. I
Mm.
That's not an experience I have. That's a guess from my logical part of my brain of putting logical,
Mm.
intuitive, putting pieces together and saying, oh, it kind of fits the descriptions that I've heard. But there's got to be something to that of like, how do I not ignore my karma or not ignore my trauma or not ignore my jealousy or not
Mm.
ignore my problematic parts,
Mm.
but also so I'm attending to them, but also they're not running the
Yeah.
scene. And they're not, I'm not exiling them. I'm not
Right.
refusing for them. It There's this guy, Donald Kalshed, who is a Jungian guy that works with trauma. And one of his things is he talks about it as like an inner democracy.
Mm.
And I like that of like the different parts of myself become they have a seat at the table. They're allowed to vote. They're allowed to speak, but none of them are allowed to speak on behalf of all the others until coalitions can form. And and I think all of that develops through this kind of rationality that we're talking about, this
Mm.
kind of mindfulness, this kind of awareness of what's going on in the self, of not turning away but
Mm.
not being swamped by either.
Mm.
um, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that.
Oof.
And so, yeah, with the Aristotle, I mean, one thing that I really liked is that there's this development of your character, right? Which
Mhm.
obviously seems like it can make you happier, more effective, better in your relationships, more self-knowledgeable. But and then so there's this idea of like this is how we live up to our potential, which is interesting because this is a part of our language, right? People say we have this idea we're different from others and we have a certain potential. It's not unlimited, but we definitely uh, can be moving towards that, right? Or moving away from that, or I should say moving towards that, or not moving towards that, or moving away from it. Um,
Mhm.
and yeah, I so it seems like, yeah, Aristotle talks about wisdom is the ability to cultivate that character and to take an active and conscious hand. And I really like that word conscious here. Conscious hand in your own growth to maximize your potential. And Vervaeke says that basically, yeah, working on your character and starting to live up to your potential is very, very related to having a sense of meaning in life. And that makes a lot of sense to me.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, because it seems like it develops that sense of meaning out of the personal, out of what we would normally think of as subjective, out of something that the Enlightenment would probably have ignored. And here we are with the society built on Enlightenment values, sort of. Um, and one of the things that was lost becomes the place we have to turn to find what we are missing, our sense of meaning, our sense of purpose.
Mm.
Um, and I think a mistake a lot of people make these days probably is of looking for somebody outside of themselves to tell them what their meaning or their purpose is,
Yeah.
rather than using what you find outside of yourself to clarify something internal, like you seem to be pointing to from Vervaeke. Um, and it has to be unique because, or at least it has to include the unique, because if it doesn't, it won't actually feed you. Like it won't, if it doesn't have some motif or some element of the personal self in it, the subjective, if it's not subjective, if it doesn't include the subjective, it can't provide a meaning and a purpose that is uniquely tailored to you and all the things that you carry.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
Um,
right. I agree.
yeah, yeah,
And yet yeah, you do need to live as you are and like the best version of that. And I think yeah, I think that's the idea we have when we say being the best version of yourself. I think there's something about that. And of course, actually knowing what that is and doing it is much, much harder than just the concept of it. But I think that can lead to a lot of meaning in life where, in everything, whatever it is, career, family, relationships, spiritual development, you do feel like you're moving up, you're moving forward and I think you can't help but feel a sense of purpose. And then as you move forward, also new possibilities open up when you're not repeating the same patterns or something like that mindlessly. You're aware of new opportunities opening up. And I think that definitely gives you a sense of purpose and
yeah, yeah. That
possibility.
that reminds me of there's that sort of cliche or often quoted thing of like doing the same thing over and over again is the definition of, and expecting different results is the definition of insanity,
Yeah.
right? And one of my problems with that is that doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results is also the definition of practice.
Hmm.
Think of playing the piano, playing the scales. You're
Mm.
doing the same thing over and over again, but you're trying to develop a different. And
Mm.
that bugged me for a long time. And I tried to understand, because they're both pointing at something true, and yet
Mm.
they seem to be contradicting each other. The truth doesn't contradict itself. So what
Mm.
am I missing?
Mm.
And I think the key there is what you're talking about is attention, is like is
Mm.
noticing what you are doing, is being there, is conforming to the practice. If you are aware and you are engaged in what you are doing, then you notice little things you can change and get better at. And then you're not doing the same thing exactly.
Right.
You're
Yeah,
doing
I agree.
slightly different things and getting better at it. But you also can just practice and practice and practice and not get anywhere with it because you're not engaging in the process. I have found these podcasts really helpful for me in watching them once they come up, and seeing myself on the screen, and hearing myself talk as an objective thing, as like, oh, I listen to a lot of podcasts. Here's another one. It just happens to have this person named Ian on it. What's he like? And seeing myself in that sort of objective way has been interesting. I
Mhm.
feel like it's helped me engage in this process in a way that um, that I wouldn't have if I were to just do the first time over and over and over again.
Hmm.
And so there's something about that observing of the self that is helpful, but how to do that in the present moment without slipping into that further and further removed observer who isn't actually present to their life anymore is I think a complicated thing for me. Um, but yeah, I think that growth process that you're talking about is reinforced by our presence, by our willingness to engage in our lives and in the process. That
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, completely. I agree. Supposedly, even with physical exercise, being focused on what you're doing will help the results. Even something that I sort of think of as like a simple kind of thing that you're learning is enhanced. I guess Arnold Schwarzenegger said that, and other
So,
exercise scientists have talked about strength as like being as much or more about your nervous system, including your brain, as it is about the muscles. And sometimes I think we like, I know I have exercise. Sometimes we just kind of do it and think about something else. And I know besides the exercise, the results for your health or strength, I think that also is kind of like sort of leads to a little unhappiness when you're not focused on whatever you're doing in the moment.
yeah.
And by the way, to bring it back to Rousseau, I think he defines happiness in his way of like seemingly simplistic statement that has depths to it. Happiness as simply focused on what you're doing in every situation, which of course is, sort of Buddhistic kind of sounding. But isn't that kind of true? Like, I mean, besides like physical needs suffering, if you don't have enough food or something or shelter, like isn't, or you're very, very sick or something, like isn't most of happiness just focused on what you're doing right now? As long, assuming you have wisdom too, and you're sort of, you're choosing the right things to do. You're not we're using Tony Soprano as like the thing not to do. As long as you're not that, although
Yeah.
we could even delve into that and say maybe if he was truly focused with his whole being, including the part of him that loves the ducks, that maybe he would maybe come to a realization that he doesn't want to be doing this. He loves his wife. He loves his children. He doesn't want his children to be that life. So maybe he would start to change.
Yeah, no, I think that's spot on. Ha Say it again. Happiness is,
It's something like happiness is simply being focused on what the situation that you're in at the moment.
I mean, talk about a virtuous engine or something, a virtual, a development of character, a refining of life, and a growth. Yeah, just focusing on what you're doing because you're doing it anyway. You're not actually doing something else. And so if you're focused on what you're doing, you're almost guaranteed happiness eventually because I think everyone, even Hitler, to pull, the worst example I can think of, everyone thinks they're doing the right thing. Everybody thinks they're doing on some level, what it could be as far as like, oh, well, I, I'm killing these Jews so I can stay in power, so I can feel powerful, so I don't have to feel weak because feeling weak makes me unhappy. I mean, that's not
Yeah,
trying to
yeah,
say I understand Hitler's psychology, but just as
yeah,
a
yeah.
shorthand little sketch of why I
Mm,
even bring him up. But
mm.
like for us, like being aware of being focused on what I'm doing then shows me like is this resulting in what I want it to result in? Am I feeling the way I expect to feel? It updates my expectations, it updates my story about reality. It would generate its own meaning because if you're attending to what you're doing and you notice that you're feeling good about it, in a health, not like, oh, I feel good, but like, oh,
Yeah, yeah,
this feels meaningful. Then
yeah,
you're like, oh, then I'm gonna keep engaging in this. And if you're focusing on it and you're like, oh, I'm realizing this doesn't feel meaningful anymore,
yeah,
you're not going to engage in it. But if you're not focused on what you're doing, you can very easily keep doing something that
yeah.
completely lacks meaning because you didn't notice when meaning left the room.
Right. Oh, that's very profound. Yeah, you sort
Yeah.
of, and post hoc, because of whatever ideas, misleading ideas you have or society gave you or something like that, you could post hoc attribute some kind of meaning to it later on. Well, I'm making a lot of money, so
Hmm.
it's okay, even though I felt conflicted for the last 20 years doing that, you know. Yeah, that's very good. It generates meaning. I think that's right. Yes. Yeah, because
Yeah.
because you're seeing what it really is to you, and then you can, use that rationality to decide, what the next step is.
Yeah. Yeah. Because if you like look at the example you just gave of like I I I felt something felt bad and I did it anyway, and it's okay because I made a bunch of money. So your happiness in that moment, you were equating having a lot of money with being happy. And there's probably some kind of psychological crosswire of like, well, money means power, money means security, money means I
Yeah.
can demand things. Security, power, and being able to demand things means my needs are validated and met by the world in the
Right.
way that they are supposed to be, which is true,
Mm.
especially as children. Like
Mm.
we're talking like infants, toddlers, 5, 6 year olds. Like
Mm.
those children should have their needs met and often aren't because their parents have their own neurotic issues, and that's
Mm.
just kind of standard for being human.
Mm.
But it becomes this break between like, oh, my needs aren't being met. So there's something true about having money be equating to having needs met, equating to being happy and being good and being genuinely in the world. But somewhere along the line, you go too far and you miss it, right? And then
Yeah.
money becomes a substitute for genuinely being in the world and having your needs met.
Right.
And you chase money. And if you're paying attention, if you're focusing on what you're doing, you'll notice that the more money you make, you're not any happier, or you're less happy, or you're more stressed out because now you have to deal with all this corporate, the business stuff, and that's even less happy. And I'm 50 years old, and what did I do with my life? The whole midlife crisis thing. Um, whereas if you're paying attention, you realize, wow, the more money I make, wow, I'm making money because it's okay and that makes me happy, but does it make me happy? Like you're present for that question to present itself to you, and then you're able to say, oh, well, no, I'm not. So, wow, money doesn't equal happy, and you have this flash of insight, and you change your life in accordance with that. And there you go, developing character, and it all comes out of focusing on what you're doing when you're doing it as a means of developing happiness, genuine meaning and happiness. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, that I totally agree. I'm a little moved by that account. And
Yeah. Well, that all came to me when you quoted Rousseau or pseudo quoted because I think you were trying to remember what he actually said. So I don't want to put
mm,
it on you that you
mm,
if there was a misquote, that's fine. But
uh,
what you were pulling from Rousseau like lit that whole thing up for me. And I would not have thought of that if you hadn't put that like sort of simple phrasing forward. So
oh, that's
yeah,
great. Yeah.
yeah,
Then that's
yeah,
almost like what is it, a myth or a proverb or something like that. Yeah, that's really cool.
yeah. It
That
becomes
made
a
me what
go
you were
ahead.
saying made me think of like and Vervaeke talks about this meaning of realization, like realization into the both senses of understanding, but also fully, what's the word I'm looking for? Like embodying, being a part of, flowing with,
Mm,
like
hmm.
realization of understanding of the mind, like what I'm in sort of conceptually or rationally or something like that, but at the same time, if you could simultaneously experience the other sense of totally being in that total situation and moment, that seems like yeah, a recipe for goodness and happiness.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That presence, that like the ability of the attention to not be trapped by a certain object, but to be
Right.
open to everything that is coming into it.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Including from the
Mm.
self, you know,
Right.
as
Yeah,
opposed
of
to like
course. Yes.
alienating from the self. Yeah.
Yeah, that needs to be said. Yeah, some people might want to like, yes, I'm totally open. I'm totally into being open to the environment, but I don't really want to deal with some things that I think sometimes or I remember and but
Yeah.
no, that's a part of the equation too.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a which oh, hang on. I think I'm going too many steps ahead in the conversation. So that being present to the things in ourself, um, there's this spiritual teacher, this Austrian guy, Thomas Hubel. Um, he talks about when it comes to this kind of internal being aware of what's coming up inside myself, of I'm thankful for the things that I can see, and I'm thankful for the things that are staying hidden. And the way, what he means by that is like when you are dealing with yourself in a moment, in a situation, um, or at least this is what I think he means by it. When you're dealing with yourself in a situation, there will be things about yourself that you can see, and there will be things about yourself that you can't see. And oftentimes, for people who are on this path of personal development, there's this sense of like, oh, how am I, however old I am, and I'm still dealing with this problem. And his point is that like the the meaning, he wouldn't, this is to kind of bring his point into our language that we're developing in this moment. But this meaning, this attending to the environment, to nature, and to what's coming up from the self. Um, what comes up from the self might be numbness, it might be confusion, it might be an inability to see to the heart of my particular problem in this moment. Why am I so jealous? To kind of touch back on that other thing that we were talking about as an example, but like not knowing where that comes from, you can choose. That's the reality that you have to relate to is I
Mm.
don't know. And as soon as you're like, well, I can't not know, I have to figure it out. You're pushing that aside and you're trying to bring something else in. But if
Right.
you can, if you,
Yeah.
his point is like, oh, the part of you that is creating the not knowing, and he does a lot of trauma work. He's very trauma focused, so he deals with people with a lot of like, psychological intense, abuse history and stuff like that. So
Mm.
so the part of you that is like that is numb to that or is blocking that is doing you a favor. You needed to
Yeah.
do that to
Yeah.
survive,
Yeah.
and what you want, the best thing you can do if you're like, I'm 80 years old and I'm still angry at my mother. She's passed years ago, but I'm still angry at her. Is like, okay, I'm angry. I don't know why I'm angry. There is a part of me that is protecting me from the ache that's at the root of the behavior that is developing as anger, that shows its head as anger. And be with that, be okay with that, because that's the only way you get to a point where that doesn't impact you anymore, or where the truth of it is revealed, the light shines on the pain, the lead is alchemized into gold. But to the extent that you're like, well, I have to know what it is, so I'm going to put this label on it. I'm going to put this
Yeah.
label on it. I'm going to act as
Yeah.
if that's real, and you're not paying attention to that moment, that focus in the present moment of, is does this feel aligned? You're actually alienating yourself from the
Right.
problem that you're attempting to resolve. You're actually pushing it away from yourself by trying to solve it that way. You
Right.
solve it much better by letting it be unknown than you do by trying to slap a label on it before it tells you what it should be, before it tells you its name. In the sort of the magical sense of, when you know the name of something, then you have power over it. You stand in relation to it as the leader that it's being reported to, as opposed to
Right.
being subject to it.
Yeah.
Once you know it, and if you put a name on it that isn't true, then it's controlling you.
Right. Yeah.
You know. I'm getting
Yeah.
pretty esoteric there, but I like it. I'm going to grow with that.
No, no, it's good. And there's an imagery there too, and also the with the words, the ruler and the subject, I think it's still concrete.
Yeah, cool.
I was thinking of how Rousseau in Emile, he emphasizes something that you don't hear much from philosophers. He talks about the art of being ignorant. And I think that, yeah, that kind of it to me seems very profound to know how to be ignorant. Because conceptually, we know that we're pretty much somewhat ignorant of everything, of every single thing all the time, and yet we somehow kind of, I mean, we do have to act in the world, and we do have to act based on sort of what we sense and what we know, but we have to be able to kind of, yeah, know when to when there's nothing to be done,
Hmm.
and when we don't know something, and the art, not the science, the art of knowing how to be ignorant to me seems kind of another thing that's almost like a parable or something. To parable isn't the right word, maxim or something. I don't know what I'm trying to say, myth, but
Yeah, it's
to
a
kind of,
it's a brief bit of instruction. It's almost like
right,
a
yeah,
pill, you know? Yeah.
yeah,
It reminds me of in the Zen tradition they talk about, beginner's mind. And
right,
the
yeah,
cultivation of beginner's mind, or there's a I think there was a Korean Buddhist teacher who called it like don't know mind.
yeah,
I don't know. I don't know. And to cultivate that's something that 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 is the mind of enlightenment, in the Buddhist sense of enlightenment. That not knowing is the only, like, if I'm sorry, it's hard to put this into words, and I don't know that I understand it well enough. And even if I think even if I did understand it, it would still be hard to put into words. So I'm sort of like laughing at myself stumbling in any kind of direction with this. But if we think we know, we're looking at the knowing that we have, and putting that aside gives us a moment of I don't know. And that I don't know becomes the space that reality can then show us. The present moment presents itself in that being with itness, that conformity, knowing becomes open. We become open to it, telling us what it is. And then it can find its place with all of our previous history. But if
right,
we're focused on what we think it is, rather than on being like, well, I don't know what it is, then we're not investigating, we're not engaging with
right,
it.
yeah.
And I think, oh, what else? Yeah, and I think one other thing to say there, as far as the golden mean and not falling off on either side, is I think there's an element of having the concept that of beginner's mind, having the concept of I don't know, and then that becomes a thing that can block the conformity, that can block the knowing, the wisdom that would arise from actually engaging with reality. Um, you can just as easily get stuck in the idea of like I'm not supposed to know anything, and then your knowing, the concept becomes the the knowing tunnel of the mind through which reality has to pass in order for us to extract meaning from it, becomes blocked by either I already know what this is and I don't have to pay attention to it, or I'm not supposed to know what it is and I'm not going to have this experience. And in either case, you end up with that empty tube being blocked, that knowingness, the ability to conform with reality and be educated by it, um, being impossible for you because you're not actually meeting your reality. You're only meeting the concept that you're holding about it, and that's stale and it's old and it's not actually what's happening because it's based on something that's already happened.
Mm. Yeah,
And
and
yeah,
yeah, Oh, sorry, you're going to say
No,
something.
that was a lot. It makes my brain hurt. But go ahead.
No, no,
Yeah.
no, that was good. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, you can maybe fall into the opposite trap of just, yeah, I don't know about this, so just dismissing it. That seems not like a wise ignorance, but like a stupid, just stupidity or laziness. That seems vice, not virtue. So,
Nice. Nice distinction. Very clear. Yeah. 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 I think that's something I'm somewhat guilty of myself, just of like, well, I can't figure it out, so I guess I'm just going to ignore it because I have to go scroll Facebook,
yeah,
or whatever it is, whatever, fill in the blank of the particular vice.
yeah.
But that's something I'm working on. I've taken a lot of that off my phone, and it's been really helpful in generating a more productive day,
I
in a
think.
good way, in that virtuous way. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think taking the Cal Newport says to sort of productivity guru, but like in a good way, not like ultra productivity, but like more like life kind of balance productivity. But yeah, he says take everything interesting off your phone. Like don't carry
Oh,
around stuff that's going to draw your attention around with you, you know.
huh. Wow. Yeah. I like that.
And
Damn.
I took
Okay.
YouTube off my phone after I saw that and yeah, I think it's much better. Uh yeah.
Yeah. That's hard. We'll see. I've had a pretty good time lately not watching YouTube, but I do save all the good videos that come across. I'll watch this
Mm.
later. I'm never gonna. I have
I do that
thousands
too.
upon thousands of videos to watch later on
Yeah.
different lists, many different lists, and
Yeah.
like, yeah, I don't think if I won the lottery, I don't think I have enough time in my life to watch what I have saved, let alone the desire to sit there and partake of all that content.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
yeah, one time I had to go through for about an hour and a half erasing my watch later list because I think I was like almost at a max or something. So, yeah, it's pretty crazy.
okay, well, if there's a max, I'm probably gonna hit it pretty soon. So we'll see. Um, yeah. So anything else from the Aristotle pages?
Yeah, I was just thinking there's a few more things we could talk about, but we don't have to go through everything. But so we started talking about ignorance, like a good ignorance, an embodied sort of attentive ignorance, and not trying to rush to conclusions. Uh, but then on the other hand, there's like just sort of stupidity or foolishness. So Aristotle has this idea of foolish, and it's interesting, foolishness. I think in our Enlightenment way of thinking, we're again thinking in the sort of roughly Cartesian way of like this is propositions and it's like there's either something that's like literally true statement or not literally true, but I like Aristotle's definition that uh so foolishness comes from a lack of character. He calls it acrasia. So this is like the chocolate cake example. You know the right thing to do. It's late. It's gonna hurt my appetite. Excuse me, it's gonna hurt my sleep. I'm trying to lose weight. It's gonna hurt my day tomorrow. I know not to eat that chocolate cake. That is not my problem. I do not have a wrong belief or knowledge, and then I do it anyway.
Hmm.
So Aristotle's idea is like that. So that's a foolishness that's not from your beliefs or your knowledge or anything. It's from your lack of character development.
Hmm.
So we could talk about that, or we could talk about other things.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I think I see a danger there of thinking that the question of the cake is one of willpower. If
Yeah.
only if
Yeah.
only I
Vervaeke addresses that. Yeah.
Well, okay, then yeah, you get it. Like it did, but just to kind of briefly outline of like if only I had more self-control, or if only I could force myself more strongly,
Right. Yeah.
I would not touch that cake because I know better, and
Yeah.
damn it, I'm just too weak. And I think
Yeah.
there's a danger there of again of blinding yourself to something that is true.
Yeah.
why did you eat the cake? Like genuinely, what was it about the cake in that moment? Were you participatorily knowing in your experience enough to notice what happened right before you decided to go for the cake?
Yeah.
Did you feel depressed about having to go to work the next day?
Right. Yeah.
Maybe it's you're eating your depression away with
Yeah.
sweet food. That makes sense. People do that.
Yeah.
But it's not a question of willpower. It's a question
Yeah.
of something in you is trying to warn you that your job is deadening your life and
Mm.
that you need something alive. And the way you've learned to deal with that is by eating cake. And so
Yeah.
therefore you turn to the cake. But if you're paying attention, you notice what came before
Yeah.
reaching for the cake.
Yeah.
And to my mind, if eating cake you know you're not supposed to eat is a sign of a lack of character, then to me that means that character is your ability to know yourself, to
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
present in that moment of reaching for the cake and understanding why exactly you're doing this thing that you know is bad. And
Yeah.
then that becomes like a subjective science. You're discovering this thing
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
yourself instead of pasting over this thing about yourself through moralistic, dogmatic
Yeah.
willpower and never having a chance to actually look at
Yeah.
what it is that's driving and alienating yourself from yourself. And you're creating splits in yourself that way, that you'll have to, that's not unvirtuous. You're going to have to unsplit those at some point, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I
Um,
totally agree. And I think, yeah, so for, yeah, character development is for your ultimate wisdom. And your lack of character development is that acrasia, that foolishness. So maybe you haven't developed your balance and you haven't developed your reflexive capacity reflective capacity. And so, yeah, you're just relying on willpower and maybe some days you don't eat the cake, but you didn't learn anything about yourself. And some days you did eat the cake and you got fatter and you hurt your day the next day and you still didn't learn about yourself.
mhm,
So then it's
mhm.
sort of like this is becoming like a myth where it's not the cake.
Yeah, and you end up in a sort of negative feedback loop of like, I have to willpower and not have the cake. Okay, I did it. Oh, now I didn't do it this
Right.
time, and I
Yeah.
have to do it
Yeah.
again, and
Yeah.
I'm feeling hurt,
Exactly.
and even when I have the willpower to not eat the cake, it doesn't make me happy. I'm
Yeah.
just sad and I'm thinking about cake all night.
Yeah.
You know? So then you get stuck in this. I mean, to me, this is one root of the meaning crisis. It's not knowing ourselves. It's feeling
Yeah.
stuck between I have to willpower myself into unhappiness or I have to surrender into a happiness that is hurting me. And in
Yeah.
either case, neither of those are working for me, but that's all I can see. And I'm stuck there.
Yeah.
And my life has no meaning. And therefore, nihilism must be true. And I must destroy myself or society, or
Yeah.
I have every right to lash out
Yeah.
resentfully at this hellscape in which I live.
Yeah.
You know, and all of that just comes from like not being aware that you have an option
Mm.
of treating the problem of the cake as an experiment in self-discovery and development of meaning. You know, if you look at it that way of like, okay, well, what is this problem trying to show me about myself? Why am I here? Why do I keep finding myself in the fridge at midnight, staring at the cake, telling myself I'm a terrible person, but being unable to walk away from it without feeling unhappy? What is actually going on here? There's your development of character. There's your steps towards wisdom.
Yeah,
And if you don't
completely.
ask yourself that question, you're stuck in the meaning crisis. You're stuck in um, nihilism because
Yeah.
you think these two things, you think because you have a conflict that one has to win,
Yeah.
when the root of the conflict is lack of self-knowledge,
Right.
lack of participatory engagement with whatever it is that's happening in the unconscious that is leading to this behavior,
Yeah.
and not trusting the world or reality, God, whatever you want to put, you know, the universe, you're not trusting that this situation is happening for your benefit, for you to learn something about yourself. Now, obviously, there
Mm.
are things, I don't want to imply that everything that happens in the world is for our benefit. And, you
Yeah.
know, there's a lot of bad things that happen. But I think I would hazard a guess that a lot of the bad things that happen to us because somebody somewhere didn't resolve their particular cake issue, developed a bunch of neuroses, compensatory behaviors that had them impact other people's lives in negative ways that trickle down through the generations and like cause a lot of problems. And so it becomes our responsibility to do the best we can to uncover those truths about ourselves and then make the world a more virtuous place by making ourselves more virtuous, and the effects of our actions through time into the future take on that virtue as we develop it in ourselves.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
completely agree. Yeah,
Fuck
there's
yeah.
so there's a yeah, that was really good. So like how self-knowledge and wisdom develops into goodness. You just kind of painted a logical sequence of how that can happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
as you were talking, I was thinking of I was having an image of like a person like facing a cake and seeing how that could sort of be in like a short movie where on the one hand it is a portal or the it is a symbol of like an ascent into heaven, or it is a dark symbol of a descent into hell. And it's the
Mhm.
same thing both times, but it totally depend, you know, your framing of it, your sense of yourself and the experience is completely different depending on the approach.
Yeah. Yeah, I could even see it being like in the movie format of like the person staring at the cake, and then there's like, imagery and voiceover or whatever of like, oh, if I eat the cake, I'll feel really good and it'll taste good, and then I'll feel shitty yes tomorrow, and that'll be really bad. And oh, if I willpower through the cake, it'll seem really good, but it's like a false heaven because I'm still dissatisfied on the other side, and it's boring, and it lacks enjoyment, and it's just a question of deprivation, and I can only keep that willpower up for so long, and sort of being stuck between these two competing voices that get louder and louder and louder, and the person just kind of like getting overwhelmed by them to the point where the sadness breaks through, the grief or whatever it is that is underlying the need for the cake. Why do you want the cake? What is driving that grasping for the cake that you then have to say yes or no to? If you don't know why you want it and you only have to say yes or no to it, you might want it because something in you is hurting and you've mistaken cake as the solution for that hurt. And it's not. And because it's not, you're stuck in this loop of willpower versus decadence, willpower versus decadence. Um, but all of that is a pull away from the sadness that has you eat the cake in the first place, the sadness that has you need sugar and chocolate as a means of feeling better about yourself. Which fine, like do it if you need to eat the cake because you're sad. You're better off eating the cake because you're sad and you feel better if you know that's why you're doing it than you are refusing to eat the cake and continuing to feel sad. But you're also bad if you eat the cake and you think you're actually feeling better. But if you can use it as a means of like uncovering that hurt, whatever it is that's driving that behavior, then you can develop character. Then you can integrate that part more consciously. Then it stops becoming an obstacle, and you can eat cake and enjoy cake when it's the time to have cake.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I like that, how that it ends up leading towards moderation.
Yeah.
Where and that's again kind of like the Buddha, right? He goes from the palace, he goes to the asceticism, and eventually he's eating the rice porridge, and it's a it's a moderate thing. You're back to sort of living like a normal person, but you're completely different.
hmm Yeah, because you're no longer caught in the things that pull you away from it, from that living like a normal person. You're
Yeah,
sort of free of all those encumbrances.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And that, yeah,
Yeah.
freedom, right? Liberation. Isn't that what the Buddha was teaching?
Yeah. 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 Whoa.
So do you want to keep going with the Aristotle, or you feel like we're reaching an ending point?
I feel like it's definitely could go either way. This has been very long, and I'm not sure how much people are going to necessarily sit through like a 5 hour. I don't know how long it's
Yeah.
been. It feels like it's been.
Yeah.
I've been enjoying it. I don't want to stop, and I'm sure there's more we could talk about, but it might be worth divvying this up into smaller sections. I'm not sure. We've had sort of that pause. Um, so maybe it's like we could do like a three-parter. We could keep going if there's more to get into. I definitely think that the conformity and the knowing in that way is interesting, and I'm happy to go there. I don't have any particular plans for today.
Mm.
Um, Again, my only concern would be the audience.
Mm.
So
Yeah, yeah, I don't know. I've listened to really long podcasts before and they've talked about how like, well, the three people that are still listening, and I was still listening like very interestedly, so I didn't know if I was like the three people still in the audience, and the actors can't see us because of the lights, but but I was still interested. But yeah, maybe we'll split the difference and kind of like sign off for a second and do a new podcast that I'll release very soon after and kind of do it that way.
yeah, let's I could use a bathroom break anyway. So let's take a break like we just did before, and then you can sort of decide how you want to patch them all together.
Yeah, yeah, sounds
That'll be
good.
okay.